Welcome to the Forever in Their Hearts podcast with Dale Martin Jr., brought to you by Martin Brothers, providing funerals designed and customized to be as special as your loved one lost. Now, here's your host.
Well, hello, one and all. This is Erik Reynolds. I'm your host today, and I'm back again today with Valerie Martell, Director of Operations for Martin Brothers Funeral Services. And today, we're talking with Valerie about the types of memorials and monuments that families choose and other ways to preserve their loved ones' memories. Now, before Valerie joins us, just as a reminder, as always, if you have questions, if you require assistance, you got to reach out to Martin Brothers Funeral Services in Vancouver at 778-330-7799. Again, that's 778-330-7799. Well, Valerie, it's great to be talking with you one more time today.
Nice to talk to you, Erik.
Well, you know, Valerie, I see so many different places where people choose to put a memorial for a person who has died. Now, what is this all about?
Well, often these are called spontaneous memorials. It doesn't really matter what they're called, but that's what they are called. Often they're placed where someone who has tragically died, such as an accident site, or in a place where the person once lived or worked, such as when people lay flowers, notes, and pictures and candles and all those kinds of things at places like a police station, for instance, when an officer has been killed. These spontaneous memorials are really important in many ways. First, they're a way for people to gather and to grieve. They don't take the place of the memorial event, so they don't take the place of the funeral per se, but they allow ongoing expressions of grief and support. They also serve as a warning that when we see a memorial at a crosswalk, for instance, we as drivers acknowledge that we need to drive more carefully, whether it's something we're thinking about, or whether it's just that little nuance that we see that and we kind of think, we should slow down just a touch.
Yeah.
Pedestrians, too, they get a little twinge of caution as they cross. This isn't meant to scare anyone or make people live in a bubble in any way, but it's simply a reminder that we're all mortal, that we're all somewhat vulnerable, and we're all responsible for not only our own safety, we're responsible for other people's safety and well-being. So they serve a lot of purposes. Even though these little memorials fade, sometimes they blow away, or they simply disappear, they serve an important purpose in our grieving process, particularly at the beginning. When somebody has tragically passed, it allows people to gather together. And sometimes these are people who won't be part of the funeral just because they're so far removed. So you hear about something tragic in the news and you actually go out and lay flowers. It's a way of public grieving, first and foremost. So they'll always serve an important purpose.
Yeah, and I really connected when you said it was just a way for us to be a caution and think about not only our own well-being, but the well-being of others. And myself, my wife, when we're driving, we see those. It's really kind of the conversation that pops up. But now the other side of that, and not to discount at all these spontaneous memorials, but, I really like the idea of a cemetery and a headstone. But I was thinking about people that are cremated. Now, what about them? Can they still have a grave with a headstone?
Absolutely, Erik. Often cemeteries have graves that are specifically meant for cremated remains. They're smaller, of course, than a standard grave, and they're often meant to contain 2 urns that will be interred there. So often a couple will buy those, and even if a person is alone, you can still purchase that type of a grave and have 1 urn in there. Also, a full-sized casket grave can most often be used for up to 8 urns. A lot of times you can place 2 caskets in there, so 2 actual buried people in there, plus 8 urns on top. And they're sometimes purchased to become, for all intents and purposes, a family plot. So every cemetery has their own bylaws that state what kind of a monument or headstone that you can put on that grave, and some allow, of course, for those upright markers, and others will allow only for a flat marker that's flush with the ground, flush with the lawn. So, if one or other of those styles of monument is preferable to you, myself, for instance, I want a big old upright monument. I want something really substantial. Yeah. So it might be worth researching where you can have that type of monument, because often, if you purchase a plot in a spot where you can't have that big monument, you're not going to get that. So at least ask your funeral director where these different cemeteries are and what you can have in them, so that you're not disappointed either way.
And Valerie, thinking about this and conversations we've had in the past about one of the beautiful things that Martin Brothers does is have some really special services for scattering the loved one's remains at sea. Now, with that in mind, can we still place a memorial somewhere so that we have a place to visit and remember?
Oh, you definitely can. There are so many places that you can look to for this. Often, starting with cemeteries, they'll have a memorial wall. No matter if the person's interred there or not, you may have scattered at sea with us, you can actually place a bronze plaque on that wall, and it's got your loved one's name and your loved one's birth and death dates. And so that's one option. Also, many cities they allow memorials on things like park benches, picnic tables. So, in fact, you're sponsoring that park bench, the upkeep of it, by paying for the memorial to be placed on that park bench. Some places allow for memorial trees to be planted, and they'll have a little plaque, a little place for dedication of that tree. So there are all kinds of special ways that you can actually have a place to go and to visit. Other ideas, if you don't want to have it in a public place like that, a cemetery or a park or things, you might choose to have a rock engraved and incorporate that into the landscape of your family home, or even a granite bench or a stepping stone in the yard. Those are very personal. Often you can only, it's not the public going in your yard, so they're really meant for the family to remember and enjoy and have those moments of the stories of your loved one. So just like funerals, monuments, the memorials, they're individual. They're really individual as your loved one lost, and so there are so many ways to commemorate their life. When we go out on our boat to scatter a person's cremated remains at sea, what we do is we actually take an imprint of the exact GPS coordinates. So what we'll do is we'll give you a certificate or other keepsake of your choice. We make that with that place right on there. So you know where your loved one had their final committal. And that's a really special keepsake for many reasons. Number one, even if you never do get back on a boat and go out there, you've got that forever. But in reality, you can go back there on a boat and you can go to that spot. In fact, we can take you to that spot. Let's say 1 year later, you say, I want to have a special little gathering of my family, and I want to go out to the spot where we placed Mom's cremated remains, where we finally committed her into the sea. Can we go out to that spot? Absolutely, we can do that. You don't have to be scattering to come out on our yacht. We can do a family reception where we just go out to remember and go to the spot. It's a really, really special time for families.
And, Valerie, hearing you talk about all the different types of memorials, that they're available, it reminds me of a very keen fact that you have seen probably so many really neat and creative things, and it just gave me so many ideas of what's possible. Now, with that in mind, how would I even begin to go about deciding what my memorial or what any memorial should look like? With so many different options, so many ideas, who helps me with that?
Well, certainly your funeral director is the best person to help you with that. When I'm sitting down to meet a family, I'm learning a lot about them. I know their preferences for style. I know the interests of the deceased. Maybe they were a fisherman, perhaps, or they took pride in growing the best roses. I can begin by showing them options that fit their style. So since we already have all that information on file, we have everything we need to actually put the monument together. So it makes all kinds of sense to start that process with us and get their monument with us. So I can show you all different types of materials, granite, I can show you bronze, I can show you all the different colors of granite, and all the different motifs you can have on there. You might say, I want to have an epitaph on there. I want to have a little saying, but I don't know what. And I can remind you of some of the things that you might have told me during the funeral arrangement itself, and that might spark your imagination in that way. So also, besides the things in the cemetery that I can put you in touch with, I have all the information too about those unconventional places and ways that you might want to commemorate your loved one and really give them that final permanent place of memorial. And finally, once that monument or once that memorial is in place, so let's say you have me place a monument in a cemetery or dedicate a park bench, what I do is I'm in touch, of course, with the people who we get to do that. And once it's completed, once I know it's there and everything is good, I'll call the family. And what I do is I arrange to pick them up, and I take them out. I actually go to their home with our limousine, and I take them out to see that completed monument, that completed memorial for the first time. What it does is it allows the family again to gather, to remember. Of course, in the practical sense, it does allow them to see that it actually, is there and everything is fine with it. But it's a really special time again for families because they can gather. They don't have to think about driving out there. I'll take them out and I'll just step aside and say, there it is, go and take a look. And often families will stand there for quite a significant amount of time. Sometimes they'll bring flowers or whatever, and they're really happy to see that final place of rest is in place. It's there. Whether it's a park bench, they'll sit on the park bench. They will take pictures of the family. It's kind of an interesting, I really enjoy that because even though I step back and I allow them to go and take a look on their own, I'm there and I'm present too. And because I've gone through all of this with the family, it's a real sort of wrap up. It's that final time. Often when I see a family, although they're welcome to see me at any time, sometimes that's my last time I see the family, and it's very satisfying to watch that they're satisfied with where their loved one is at. So that's really special.
Yeah, sounds like a really special thing, and what a great service to offer as a funeral director to really help throughout the process, including designing the memorial. Now, Valerie, before we go, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I do, Eric. It's really important. Sometimes families don't think of this at the time of the funeral arrangements, but it is important to really think to that final resting place, whether you have scattered your loved one or whether they're interred in the ground. It's really important to think about whether, number one, you need a place to go to or you want a place to go to. Think about that. Some families will say, oh, no, it's okay. We've scattered and we're fine. And then a few weeks later, they'll come to me and say, the grandkids are really asking, is there somewhere that we can go, that we can put flowers? People see this on television even, people placing flowers on a grave. So when you don't have that, place, sometimes people think, well, maybe it's not really wrapped up. So that's a really important step, and it's part of everything. And I will always remind families of that. I will say to them, maybe let's consider this. And families sometimes haven't considered placing a permanent marker somewhere, but it's important, and it's just another part of going through that process, and we will assist you with that.
Oh, Valerie, thanks so much for the information. Your experience, your knowledge in this area, I think is really helpful for families as they try to figure out, the different types of memorials and monuments that work for their loved ones. Now, for our listeners, can you think of somebody who might benefit from what we've covered today? Maybe they're in that monument and memorial planning process and have questions. You need to forward this episode on to them. I promise you they'll thank you for it. And of course, if you have questions, if you require assistance, you can and need to reach out to Martin Brothers Funeral Services in Vancouver at 778-330-7799. One more time, that's 778-330-7799, or visit their website at www.mbfunerals.com. Again, that's www.mbfunerals.com. Well, Valerie, as always, thanks so much for the call today.
Thanks, Eric.
You've been listening to the Forever in Their Hearts podcast with Dale Martin Jr. from Martin Brothers Funeral Services. Our 4 generations of service in the funeral profession have equipped us with a legacy of understanding. In your hour of need, Martin Brothers is there. Call Martin Brothers in Vancouver today at 778-330-7799 and visit them online at www.mbfunerals.com.